The champagne glass slipped from my fingers, crystal shattering against the marble floor of our Scottsdale home as I watched my husband of 7 years slide my grandmother's antique wedding ring onto another woman's finger. Not just any woman, Vanessa Klein, his college sweetheart who had waltzed back into our lives 6 months ago claiming she needed closure. The closure, apparently, involved my most precious possession adorning her manicured hand while our anniversary guests mingled obliviously on the patio outside. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus looked up at the sound of breaking glass, his face cycling through guilt, defiance, and something else I couldn't quite place. Vanessa turned too, her smile triumphant as she flexed her fingers, making the diamonds catch the Arizona sunset streaming through our floor-to-ceiling windows. The ring, a family heirloom passed down through 4 generations of Rodriguez women, looked obscene on her pale skin. "Elena, I can explain," Marcus started, but I held up my hand, stopping him mid-sentence. The gesture was eerily calm, considering the volcanic rage building in my chest. What he couldn't see, what neither of them could see, was the small smile playing at the corners of my mouth. This moment, devastating as it appeared, was exactly what I had been waiting for. The final piece clicking into place in a puzzle I'd been assembling for months. The morning of our 7th wedding anniversary started like any other Saturday in our pristine Scottsdale neighborhood. The October sun painted the desert landscape in shades of gold and amber, and our Spanish-style villa looked picture-perfect against the backdrop of Camelback Mountain. I stood in our master bathroom, applying makeup with the precision of someone preparing for war rather than celebration. Marcus emerged from our walk-in closet, adjusting his tie, the navy silk one I'd bought him for his last birthday. He looked handsome as always, his dark hair perfectly styled, his smile reaching his eyes in a way that used to make my heart skip. Now it just reminded me of how convincingly he could perform when the occasion demanded it. "You look beautiful, Elena," he said, stepping behind me to kiss my neck. His reflection in the mirror showed practiced affection, the kind of gesture that had become automatic over the years. "Ready for tonight?" "More than ready," I replied, meeting his eyes in the mirror. The double meaning hung between us, though only I understood its significance. Tonight would indeed be memorable, just not in the way he expected. Our anniversary party had been in planning for months. Marcus had insisted on hosting it at our home, inviting 50 of our closest friends, family, and business associates. The guest list read like a directory of Phoenix's rising professional class: his construction company clients, my real estate development colleagues, neighbors from our exclusive Gainey Ranch community. Everyone who mattered in our carefully curated life would be there to witness what Marcus believed would be another celebration of our perfect marriage. What Marcus didn't know was that I had been documenting the slow deterioration of that marriage with forensic precision. The late-night phone calls he thought I couldn't hear, the sudden business trips that coincided perfectly with Vanessa's visits to Phoenix, the way his behavior shifted whenever her name came up in conversation, becoming either overly dismissive or suspiciously defensive. I had started noticing the changes 6 months ago, when Vanessa Klein re-entered our lives. She'd contacted Marcus through LinkedIn, claiming she was relocating to Phoenix for a new job and hoping to reconnect with old friends. The message seemed innocent enough when Marcus showed it to me, complete with professional headshots and details about her new position at a tech startup downtown. But something about the timing felt calculated, arriving just weeks after Marcus had secured the biggest contract in his company's history, a luxury resort development that would cement his reputation in the Arizona construction industry. The first red flag came during their initial coffee meeting. Marcus returned home that afternoon with an energy I hadn't seen in years, talking animatedly about old college memories and how successful Vanessa had become in her marketing career. The way his eyes lit up when he mentioned her name set off alarm bells that I'd learned to trust during my 15 years in real estate development. In my business, reading people's true intentions often meant the difference between profitable deals and devastating losses. I began what I privately called my investigation that very evening. While Marcus showered, I scrolled through Vanessa's social media profiles, noting inconsistencies in her story. Her LinkedIn profile showed a gap in employment that coincided perfectly with a messy divorce from a wealthy tech executive in San Francisco. Her Instagram posts from recent months showed increasingly desperate attempts at maintaining a luxury lifestyle that her current job salary couldn't support. Most telling were the photos from Phoenix that predated her supposed job offer by several weeks, suggesting she'd been in town much longer than she'd claimed. The pattern that emerged over the following weeks was both predictable and infuriating. Marcus began working later, claiming increased pressure from the resort project. His phone, once carelessly left around the house, became permanently attached to his person. He started going to the gym more frequently, updating his wardrobe with clothes that were slightly younger, slightly trendier than his usual conservative style. Classic signs of a man trying to recapture his youth with someone who represented his road not taken. But I didn't confront him. Instead, I began building my case with the same methodical approach I used when researching property acquisitions. I installed tracking software on our shared computer, monitoring his email and browsing history. I documented his schedule discrepancies, cross-referencing his claimed locations with credit card purchases that told different stories. Most importantly, I began transferring assets into accounts he couldn't access, slowly and carefully moving our joint investments into my sole control. The breakthrough came 3 months ago, when Marcus's business partner, Kevin Brooks, inadvertently revealed that the resort project meetings Marcus claimed were keeping him busy didn't match Kevin's calendar. A casual conversation at a neighborhood barbecue exposed a web of lies about late-night planning sessions and weekend site visits that had never occurred. Kevin's confused expression when I mentioned Marcus's supposed Saturday meeting told me everything I needed to know about where my husband was really spending his time. That night, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible to the Elena of 7 years ago, the one who had walked down the aisle believing in forever. I contacted Robert Chen, a private investigator whose services I'd used for property due diligence in the past. Robert was discreet, thorough, and completely uninterested in moral judgments about his clients' situations. Within a week, he was providing me with photographic evidence of Marcus and Vanessa's affair, complete with timestamps and locations that contradicted every story Marcus had told me. The photos were devastating and liberating in equal measure. Devastating because they confirmed my worst fears with brutal clarity. Intimate dinners at restaurants across town, romantic walks through Papago Park, stolen kisses in hotel parking lots. Liberating because they freed me from any lingering doubt about my marriage's authenticity. The man I had loved was either gone or had never existed in the first place. But Robert's investigation revealed something even more disturbing than a simple affair. Vanessa Klein wasn't just a nostalgic ex-girlfriend seeking attention. She was a calculating opportunist with a history of targeting successful men during vulnerable transitions in their lives. Her previous marriage had ended after she'd systematically drained her husband's accounts while conducting multiple affairs. Her current financial situation was so precarious that she was facing eviction from her downtown apartment. The pattern became clear. Vanessa had researched Marcus's business success and identified him as her next target. Her random reconnection wasn't coincidental but strategic, timed to coincide with his professional triumph, when he would be feeling confident and possibly complacent in our marriage. She was playing a long game, positioning herself not just as a romantic distraction, but as a potential replacement for the life she'd lost in her divorce. This revelation transformed my heartbreak into something more dangerous. Cold, calculating fury. Vanessa wasn't just destroying my marriage, she was treating it like a hostile takeover. And if there was one thing my career in real estate had taught me, it was how to win hostile takeovers. I spent the next month planning my response with military precision. The anniversary party would be perfect. Public enough to ensure witnesses, formal enough to make the betrayal more shocking, and intimate enough to guarantee that the fallout would reach every corner of our social and professional circles. I arranged for David Park, my lawyer friend from law school, to attend as a regular guest, though he would be carrying documents that would transform the evening from celebration to legal proceeding. The guest list became my weapon. Every person Marcus cared about impressing would be there. His biggest clients, his family members who had always questioned whether he deserved me, the neighbors whose opinions shaped our community standing. I made sure our photographer would capture every moment, ostensibly for a photo album, but actually for evidence. I arranged for premium liquor to ensure tongues would be loose and reactions would be authentic. Most importantly, I orchestrated a situation that would force Marcus to reveal his true priorities in the most public way possible. The ring, my grandmother's ring that I'd worn every day for 7 years, would be the catalyst. I'd noticed him examining it recently when he thought I wasn't looking, and Robert's surveillance had captured him photographing it with his phone during one of our dinners out. The pieces were falling into place exactly as I'd hoped. As I applied my lipstick that morning, preparing for what Marcus believed would be another perfect evening showcasing our perfect marriage, I felt a strange sense of peace. The woman staring back at me from the mirror looked composed, elegant, ready for any challenge. She looked like someone who had everything under control, because for the first time in months, I did. The doorbell rang downstairs. Our caterers arriving to set up for the evening's festivities. Marcus called out that he would handle the coordination, his voice cheerful and anticipatory.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
He had no idea that while he was arranging champagne flutes and appetizer platters, I was finalizing the destruction of everything he thought he could take for granted. I slipped my grandmother's ring off my finger, feeling its familiar weight one last time before placing it in the small jewelry box on my dresser. By the end of the evening, it would be serving a very different purpose than the one my grandmother had intended when she'd passed it down to me on my wedding day. The morning sun climbed higher over the Sonoran Desert, and I could hear the sounds of our perfect life beginning to stir. Gardeners tending to our perfectly manicured landscape, neighbors starting their weekend routines, the distant hum of traffic from the nearby Scottsdale quarter where Marcus and Vanessa had been conducting their secret courtship for months. Tonight, all of that perfection would shatter like champagne glasses against marble floors. I never received a single reply. Not one. When I returned to the States, I found the letters I'd sent to my parents stacked neatly on the kitchen counter, opened but apparently unread, like bills that had been paid and filed away. The message was clear. Your life doesn't interest us. Your experiences don't matter. Your service is something we tolerate rather than celebrate. But the Army family I'd built filled that void in ways I hadn't expected. Colonel Santos recommended me for advanced training. My peers respected my judgment and sought my advice. The soldiers I led trusted me with their lives and their secrets and their fears about home. I was building something real, something valuable, something that belonged to me alone. My second deployment came 3 years later, Iraq, 2003, during the initial invasion. This time, I was a captain, with my own intelligence team, responsible for analyzing enemy movements and protecting coalition forces in the volatile region around Tikrit. The work was more intense, the stakes higher, the margin for error non-existent. I spent 13 months in the desert, in temperatures that reached 130 degrees, in conditions that tested every limit I thought I had. I learned to sleep through mortar attacks, to make life or death decisions with incomplete information, to lead soldiers who were barely older than teenagers and scared out of their minds. I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's continuing to function when fear is the only rational response. My team prevented countless attacks, saved dozens of lives, and earned commendations that would follow me for the rest of my career. When I was promoted to major ahead of schedule, my commanding officer told me I had the potential to go all the way to the top, that leaders like me were exactly what the Army needed for the challenges ahead. I called home to share the news. My mother answered on the third ring, her voice distracted. I could hear the television in the background, could picture her folding laundry or organizing her kitchen, while I tried to explain what the promotion meant, what it represented in terms of trust and responsibility and recognition. "That's nice, dear," she said when I finished. "David got promoted too. Regional manager now. We're so proud." Then she changed the subject to Jessica's engagement, to the wedding plans, to the guest list that apparently didn't include anyone currently serving in a war zone. The consulting payments correlate with cash withdrawals from your joint personal account. Someone's been very careful to make it look like business expenses while actually funding personal activities. The methodical nature of their deception almost impressed me. Almost. If Marcus had put half this effort into maintaining our marriage instead of plotting its destruction, we might have had something worth saving. Instead, he'd chosen to build an elaborate financial structure designed to support his new relationship, while keeping me unaware of the foundation crumbling beneath my feet. My next stop was the offices of David Park, my law school friend who now specialized in high-asset divorce cases. David's practice occupied an entire floor of a downtown Phoenix high-rise, his success evident in the modern art adorning the walls and the spectacular views of the valley stretching toward South Mountain. Elena, David greeted me with the professional warmth of someone who'd seen too many marriages implode to be surprised by anything. I've reviewed all the materials you provided. This is going to be more straightforward than you initially thought. We sat in his conference room surrounded by neat stacks of financial records, surveillance photos, and legal documents that represented the complete dismantling of my 7-year marriage. David had been working on this case for weeks, though Marcus had no idea that his wife's old friend was preparing to destroy him professionally and financially. Arizona is a community property state, but documented infidelity changes the calculus significantly, David explained, spreading photographs across the mahogany table. These images show a clear pattern of deception and financial misconduct. Combined with the evidence of asset manipulation, we can argue for a disproportionate settlement in your favor. The photographs told the story of Marcus and Vanessa's relationship in devastating detail. Romantic dinners charged to the business account. Hotel stays during supposed client meetings. Shopping trips where Marcus purchased jewelry that never appeared in our home. Each image was time-stamped and geotagged, creating an irrefutable timeline of deception. The consulting payments to Klein Marketing are particularly damaging, David continued. She has no legitimate business history that would justify these contracts. It's essentially documented embezzlement from the construction company to fund personal expenses related to the affair. I studied the financial analysis David's team had prepared. Thompson Construction had been Marcus's pride and joy, built from a small residential contractor into one of Phoenix's most respected commercial builders. The company's reputation had been carefully cultivated over 15 years, with Marcus positioning himself as a family man whose personal integrity matched his professional standards. The revelation that he'd been using company funds to support his mistress would destroy both his business and his standing in the tightly knit Phoenix construction community. There's one more element we should discuss, David said, his tone growing more serious. The timeline suggests this isn't Vanessa's first attempt at this type of arrangement. My investigator found records from her previous marriage that show a remarkably similar pattern. Her ex-husband filed a police report alleging financial manipulation and identity theft, though charges were never filed. This information transformed the situation from a simple affair into something more sinister. Vanessa wasn't just an opportunistic ex-girlfriend. She was a repeat offender who targeted successful men during vulnerable periods in their relationships. Marcus wasn't her lover so much as her latest mark, though his ego would never allow him to see the distinction. "What are you thinking for tonight?" David asked, leaning back in his chair. The question carried the weight of strategic planning rather than idle curiosity. "Public exposure in front of everyone who matters to his business and social standing," I replied without hesitation. "I want him to experience the same shock and humiliation he's been planning for me, except his will be justified." David nodded approvingly. In the world of high-stakes divorce litigation, public relations often mattered as much as legal strategy. Marcus's reputation as a trustworthy family man was integral to his business success. Contractors in Phoenix built their client relationships on personal trust and community standing. A very public marital scandal involving financial impropriety would devastate his professional prospects regardless of the legal outcome. "The anniversary party provides perfect cover," I continued, thinking through the evening's choreography. "He'll be relaxed, confident, surrounded by witnesses. And if I know Marcus, he'll have planned some kind of public gesture involving Vanessa. His ego demands an audience for his triumphs." David handed me a thick envelope containing the divorce papers and supporting documentation. The filing had been prepared but not yet submitted, waiting for the optimal timing that would maximize both legal advantage and public impact. In a few hours, the envelope's contents would transform from theoretical legal strategy into the instrument of Marcus's destruction. As I left David's office, the Arizona sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with Phoenix in the first place. The city had been good to us, providing opportunities and prosperity that neither Marcus nor I could have achieved individually. We'd built a life here based on mutual ambition and shared dreams. The tragedy wasn't just that Marcus had thrown that away for a manipulative opportunist like Vanessa Klein. The tragedy was that he'd done it with such breathtaking arrogance, assuming I would either never discover his betrayal or would be too weak to respond effectively. He'd underestimated both my intelligence and my capacity for strategic thinking, mistakes that would cost him everything he'd worked to build. My final stop was the small jewelry store in Kierland Commons, where I'd purchased Marcus's wedding ring 7 years ago. The elderly owner, Mr. Goldstein, remembered me despite the years that had passed since our last interaction. "Mrs. Thompson," he greeted me warmly. "What can I do for you today?" I removed my grandmother's ring from its small velvet box, placing it gently on the glass counter between us. The afternoon light caught the diamonds, sending tiny rainbows across the white display cloth. It was a beautiful piece, worth nearly $15,000, but its sentimental value was immeasurable. "I need this resized," I said, my voice steady, despite the emotional weight of the request. "Make it a size 7. Mr. Goldstein examined the ring with his jeweler's loupe, noting the intricate details of the vintage setting. "This is exquisite work. Art Deco period. Probably 1920s. The craftsmanship is extraordinary." "It belonged to my grandmother," I explained. "She wore it for 53 years of marriage." "And now you'd like it resized for your daughter?" he asked kindly. "Something like that," I replied, not bothering to correct his assumption. The ring would indeed be going to someone new tonight, though not in the way Mr. Goldstein imagined. The resizing would take only an hour, giving me just enough time to return home and begin the final preparations for the evening. As I waited in the store's comfortable seating area, I reflected on the symbolic significance of what I was doing. The ring represented 4 generations of Rodriguez women who had honored their marriage vows despite whatever challenges they'd faced. Tonight, it would serve a very different purpose, but one that was equally true to our family's values of strength and integrity. When Mr. Goldstein returned with the newly sized ring, it seemed to glow with renewed purpose. The diamonds caught the light differently now, as if they understood their role in the evening's drama. I slipped it into a small jewelry bag, handling it with the reverence of someone carrying a weapon blessed for righteous battle. The drive home through Scottsdale's tree-lined streets felt like a farewell tour of the life I was about to leave behind. Every familiar landmark carried memories of the woman I'd been before discovering Marcus's betrayal. The coffee shop where we'd celebrated his first major contract. The gallery where we'd purchased the abstract painting that dominated our living room wall. The park where we'd walked on Sunday mornings, planning the future that had turned out to be an illusion. As I pulled into our circular driveway, I could see the catering trucks already arrived and the staff beginning to transform our backyard into an elegant party venue. String lights were being hung between the desert willows, and white linens were being arranged on tables scattered across our expanded patio. Everything looked perfect, exactly as Marcus and I had envisioned when we'd planned this celebration months ago. The irony was staggering. While I'd been excitedly coordinating with florists and caterers, Marcus had been planning his own celebration of a very different sort. The anniversary party was supposed to mark 7 years of successful marriage, but for him, it had become an opportunity to publicly transition from his old life to his new one. He just didn't realize that I'd been planning my own transition with far greater skill and preparation. I parked in the garage and sat for a moment, gathering my thoughts before entering the house. In a few hours, this space would be filled with the sound of shattering glass and uncomfortable silence, as our carefully constructed social facade collapsed in spectacular fashion. By tomorrow morning, the house would feel like a museum of a marriage that had existed only in my imagination. The leather portfolio beside me contained the power to destroy Marcus's life with surgical precision. The divorce papers, financial records, surveillance photographs, and supporting documentation represented months of careful planning and strategic thinking. I'd approach the end of my marriage with the same methodical precision I'd used to build my real estate career, and the results would be equally devastating and permanent. As I walked through our front door, I could hear Marcus in the kitchen, his voice animated as he coordinated with the catering staff. He sounded genuinely excited about the evening ahead, probably because he viewed it as the perfect opportunity to humiliate me publicly while elevating Vanessa to her new position in his life. The confidence in his voice would make his eventual destruction all the more satisfying. The afternoon sun streamed through our floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the home we'd built together with such hope and ambition. In a few hours, that same light would witness the methodical destruction of everything Marcus believed he could control. The perfect setting for the perfect revenge, orchestrated by the perfect wife he'd never bothered to truly understand. The golden hour light filtered through our master bedroom as I stood before the full-length mirror, applying the finishing touches to my appearance. The crimson-red dress I'd chosen hugged my curves perfectly, its color chosen deliberately to photograph beautifully and command attention. Every detail of my look had been calculated for maximum visual impact when the evening's events unfolded. Marcus appeared in the doorway behind me, adjusting his cufflinks with the satisfied air of a man who believed everything was going according to his plan. His reflection in the mirror showed genuine excitement, the kind of anticipation I hadn't seen from him in months. It made sense now, knowing what he had orchestrated for tonight. "You look incredible," he said, stepping closer to kiss my cheek. His cologne was stronger than usual, a new scent I didn't recognize but could guess the reason for. "Tonight's going to be perfect." "I'm sure it will be memorable," I replied, meeting his eyes in the mirror. The double meaning sailed past him completely. His mind, too, focused on his own agenda to catch the subtle warning in my tone. Downstairs, our home had been transformed into an elegant party venue that would have made any lifestyle magazine proud. The catering staff moved with professional efficiency, arranging champagne flutes on silver trays and positioning appetizer stations throughout the main level. The photographer I'd hired was already capturing the pre-party setup, ostensibly for our anniversary album, but actually to document every detail of what was about to unfold. The guest list represented a careful cross-section of Phoenix's professional elite, each person selected for their influence within our social and business circles. Marcus's biggest clients would be here, including the resort developers whose project had supposedly been consuming so much of his time. My real estate colleagues would attend, along with the neighbors whose opinions shaped our community standing. Most importantly, Marcus's family members would witness whatever spectacle he had planned. As the first guests began arriving, I positioned myself strategically in our entry foyer, greeting each person with warm hospitality while mentally cataloging their importance to the evening's outcome. The Hendersons from down the street, whose approval carried weight in our Gainey Ranch community. The Patels, whose tech company provided significant contracts to Marcus's construction business. Judge Morrison and his wife, whose social endorsement had helped establish our reputation among Phoenix's legal community. "Elena, darling, you look absolutely radiant," gushed Monica Steinberg, wife of one of Marcus's major investors. Her embrace carried the practiced warmth of professional networking, but her eyes held genuine affection. Monica had been one of my strongest supporters during my rise through Phoenix's real estate development scene, and her presence tonight would add credibility to whatever revelations emerged. "Thank you, Monica. Marcus and I are so grateful you could celebrate with us," I replied, the words carrying hidden meaning that would become clear within hours. The guest who hadn't yet arrived was the one who would transform this anniversary celebration into something entirely different. Marcus worked the room with the confident charm that had first attracted me 7 years ago. He moved from group to group, sharing construction industry insights and anniversary anecdotes that painted our marriage in glowing terms. His performance was flawless, the devoted husband celebrating another year of marital bliss with the woman who'd supported his professional ascent. What the guests couldn't see was the constant checking of his phone, the subtle glances toward the front entrance, the barely contained excitement that suggested he was waiting for something specific to happen. I'd been observing these behaviors for weeks, documenting the tells that indicated when Marcus was operating according to a hidden agenda. The evening progressed through its carefully choreographed phases. Cocktail hour featured networking conversations and anniversary well-wishes that established the celebratory atmosphere Marcus needed for his planned revelation. Dinner showcased the successful life we'd built together, with guests raising toasts to our partnership and expressing admiration for what we'd accomplished as a team. 7 years, announced Kevin Brooks, Marcus's business partner, raising his champagne glass toward our table. 7 years of watching Marcus and Elena build something beautiful together. Their success in business mirrors their success in marriage, and we're all privileged to witness both. The irony of Kevin's toast wasn't lost on me, considering his unwitting role in exposing Marcus's deception months earlier. His genuine admiration for our supposedly perfect partnership would make the evening's revelations all the more shocking to everyone present. As dinner concluded and guests began mingling on our expanded patio, I noticed Marcus becoming increasingly animated. His conversations grew more abbreviated, his attention repeatedly drawn to the front of the house where new arrivals would appear. The anticipation radiating from him was almost palpable, suggesting that whatever he'd planned was imminent. The desert evening was perfect for outdoor entertaining, with temperatures dropping to comfortable levels as the sun disappeared behind the western mountains. String lights created a magical ambiance among the desert landscaping, and the distant city lights twinkled like stars across the valley floor. Everything was set for a romantic anniversary celebration that would be remembered for very different reasons. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the patio with practiced authority, "Elena and I want to thank you all for being here tonight. 7 years ago, we made promises to each other in front of our families and closest friends. Tonight, we want to renew those promises and share some exciting news about our future." The crowd gathered in a natural semicircle, phones emerging from purses and pockets to capture what everyone assumed would be a touching anniversary moment. The photographer moved to get optimal angles, ensuring that every expression and reaction would be documented for posterity. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box that made several guests gasp with anticipation. The box was instantly recognizable as the type that held expensive jewelry, and the timing suggested some kind of surprise gift that would demonstrate his devotion publicly. "Elena has been the foundation of everything I've accomplished," Marcus continued, his voice taking on the emotional tone of a man overcome with gratitude. "She's supported my dreams, celebrated my successes, and stood by me through every challenge. Tonight, I want to show her how much that means to me." The crowd murmured appreciatively, clearly moved by his apparent sincerity. What they couldn't see was the calculation behind his words, the way he was building toward a climax that would serve his purposes rather than honor our marriage. "But first," Marcus said, his smile taking on a different quality, "I need to be completely honest about something that's been weighing on my heart." The atmosphere shifted subtly, excitement mixing with curiosity as guests sensed that Marcus was about to reveal something unexpected. The photographer continued capturing every moment, unknowingly documenting what would become evidence in legal proceedings. "Marriage is about growth," Marcus continued, "about becoming the people we're meant to be. Sometimes that growth takes us in directions we never anticipated." I felt the familiar tightening in my chest that had accompanied every one of Marcus's manipulative speeches over the past months. He was building toward his revelation with the same calculated approach he used for major business presentations, crafting his narrative to position himself as the victim of circumstances rather than the architect of betrayal. "Elena, you've been an amazing wife," Marcus said, turning to face me directly. "But we both know that we've grown apart. We both know that we want different things from life." The guests shifted uncomfortably, realizing that they were witnessing something far more complex than a simple anniversary celebration. Conversations stopped entirely, as everyone focused on the drama unfolding before them. "That's why I think it's time for us to be honest about what we both need," Marcus continued, his voice gaining confidence as he approached his planned climax. "Elena, you deserve someone who can give you the attention and devotion you need. And I deserve the chance to find the happiness I've been missing." The velvet box in his hand seemed to pulse with significance as he opened it slowly, revealing the contents to the assembled crowd. But instead of the expensive jewelry everyone expected, the box contained my grandmother's antique wedding ring, the family heirloom that had adorned my finger for 7 years of marriage. "This ring represents a promise that I can no longer keep," Marcus announced, his voice carrying across the silent patio. "Elena, I'm returning this to you because I've found someone else who makes me happy. Someone who understands what I need from a relationship." The gasps from the crowd were audible, a collective intake of breath, as the assembled guests realized they were witnessing the public dissolution of a marriage they'd been celebrating moments earlier. Phones remained raised, capturing every moment of what was becoming a spectacle rather than a celebration. "Vanessa," Marcus called toward the house, "would you join us, please?" The patio doors opened to reveal Vanessa Klein, dressed in a stunning blue gown that complemented Marcus's navy suit perfectly. She moved with confident grace toward our gathering, her smile radiant as she approached the man who represented her financial salvation. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Vanessa Klein," Marcus announced, his arm encircling her waist with possessive pride. "Vanessa and I have found something special together, and we wanted to share our happiness with the people who matter most to us." The crowd remained frozen in uncomfortable silence, processing the surreal nature of what they were witnessing. This wasn't an anniversary celebration anymore. It was a public humiliation designed to demonstrate Marcus's power over both me and our social circle. "Marcus," I said quietly, my voice carrying just enough emotion to suggest devastation while maintaining dignity, "are you seriously doing this at our anniversary party?" "Elena, please don't make this harder than it needs to be," Marcus replied, his tone patronizing in a way that made several guests visibly uncomfortable. "We both know this marriage has been over for months. I'm just being honest about what we both already know." Vanessa stepped forward, extending her hand toward me with false sympathy that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Elena, I hope you can understand that sometimes these things just happen. Marcus and I didn't plan for this, but we can't deny what we feel for each other." The performance was masterful in its cruelty, designed to position me as the pitiful wife who couldn't hold her husband's interest while elevating Vanessa as the vibrant woman who'd captured his heart. Every word was calculated to maximize my humiliation, while garnering sympathy for their supposedly inevitable romance. "I have something for you, Vanessa," Marcus continued, reaching for my hand to remove the ring he'd just claimed to return to me. "Something that represents the new beginning we're starting together." The moment had arrived. Marcus was about to take my grandmother's ring from my finger and place it on Vanessa's hand in front of 50 witnesses, completing the public transfer of his affections in the most devastating way possible. But as his fingers touched the ring, preparing to slide it from my finger, something unexpected happened. Instead of resistance or tears, I began to laugh. Soft at first, then building to a clear, genuine sound that cut through the uncomfortable silence like a blade. Marcus froze, confusion replacing confidence as he processed my reaction. This wasn't part of his script. The devastated wife wasn't supposed to find anything amusing about her public humiliation. "Elena," he said uncertainly, "are you all right?" "I'm perfect," I replied, my laughter continuing as I looked around at the assembled guests. "Absolutely perfect. Marcus, this is exactly what I was hoping would happen tonight." The confusion on his face deepened as he tried to process my words. Vanessa stepped closer, her own uncertainty beginning to show as she realized something wasn't unfolding according to their plan. "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, his voice losing some of its confident authority. I smiled at him with genuine warmth for the first time in months, the expression of a woman who finally had everything exactly where she wanted it. "I mean, darling, that you've just given me the most beautiful anniversary gift I could have asked for," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent patio. "You've just proved, in front of everyone who matters to both of us, exactly who you really are." Part 4, The Unraveling. The silence that followed my laughter stretched across the patio like a taut wire, every guest frozen in place as they tried to process what they were witnessing. Marcus's face cycled through confusion, irritation, and something approaching panic as he realized his carefully orchestrated humiliation wasn't proceeding according to plan. "Elena, I don't understand what you find so amusing about this," he said, his voice taking on the sharp edge it acquired when he felt his control slipping. "This is serious. Vanessa and I are in love, and we're tired of pretending otherwise." I wiped tears of laughter from my eyes, noting how the photographer was capturing every moment of this surreal tableau. The woman Marcus believed he was destroying publicly was instead displaying an inexplicable joy that made him look foolish rather than powerful. "Oh, Marcus," I said, my voice warm with genuine affection. "You sweet, predictable man. Do you really think I didn't know about your little romance? Do you honestly believe I've been sitting here for months, oblivious to what you've been planning?" The color began draining from his face as the implications of my words registered. Around us, the guests leaned forward, sensing that the evening's drama was taking an unexpected turn that none of them had anticipated. "I know about the consulting payments to Klein Marketing Solutions," I continued conversationally, as if discussing the weather. $40,000 over 6 months, all carefully disguised as business expenses. Very creative accounting, darling. Vanessa's confident smile faltered as she glanced nervously between Marcus and me. This wasn't the devastated wife breaking down under pressure. This was someone who clearly held information that could destroy them both. "I know about the hotel receipts charged to the business account during your supposed client meetings," I added, reaching into my small evening purse to withdraw my phone. "The Phoenician Resort, the Four Seasons, that charming little boutique place in Carefree. Always during hours when you told me you were reviewing construction plans with Kevin." Kevin Brooks, standing near the edge of the crowd, looked genuinely confused. "But Marcus, we haven't had evening meetings in months. Most of our planning sessions are scheduled for mornings." The first crack appeared in Marcus's facade as he realized his alibis were crumbling in real time. He shot Kevin a warning look, but the damage was already spreading through the crowd like ripples on water. "I know about the jewelry purchases at Tiffany and Cartier," I continued, scrolling through my phone with the casual air of someone reading a shopping list. "Interesting that none of those beautiful pieces ever appeared in our home. I can only assume they found their way to someone else's jewelry box." Vanessa unconsciously touched the diamond necklace at her throat, a gesture that several guests noticed with growing understanding. The expensive accessories she'd been wearing to recent social events suddenly made sense in a much more sordid context. "Elena, you're making wild accusations," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. The confident man who'd been orchestrating my public humiliation moments earlier was rapidly being replaced by someone defensive and increasingly desperate. "Am I?" I asked, tapping my phone screen. "David, would you join us, please?" David Park emerged from the crowd where he'd been standing as just another guest, but now he carried a leather portfolio that transformed him from party attendee to legal counsel. His presence immediately elevated the tension, signaling that whatever was happening had serious implications beyond social embarrassment. "Marcus, Vanessa," David said with professional courtesy. "I'm David Park, Elena's attorney. I have some documents you might find interesting." He opened the portfolio and withdrew a stack of papers that gleamed white under the string lights. The legal documents were immediately recognizable to anyone who'd been through divorce proceedings, their official formatting unmistakable even from a distance. "These are divorce papers, filed this afternoon with Maricopa County Family Court," David announced, his voice carrying clearly across the silent patio. "They cite irreconcilable differences, adultery, and financial misconduct as grounds for dissolution of marriage." The crowd erupted in whispers as the full scope of the evening's drama became clear. This wasn't just a marriage imploding spontaneously. This was a calculated legal maneuver that had been planned with precision timing. "But more interesting are these supporting documents," David continued, withdrawing a second set of papers. "Financial records showing systematic misuse of business funds to support an extramarital relationship. Bank statements, credit card receipts, hotel reservations, all cross-referenced with company expense reports that claim these expenditures were legitimate business costs." Marcus reached for the documents, but David held them just out of reach. "These are copies, of course. The originals are already filed with the court, along with photographic evidence that corroborates the financial misconduct." "Photographic evidence?" Vanessa asked, her voice higher than usual. David smiled with the satisfaction of an attorney who held all the winning cards. "Surveillance photographs taken over several months, documenting meetings, romantic encounters, and activities that directly contradict the business justifications claimed for related expenses." He withdrew a manila envelope and spread several 8x10 photographs across the nearest cocktail table. Even from a distance, the images were unmistakably Marcus and Vanessa in intimate settings that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. "The camera doesn't lie," I said, approaching the table to examine the photographs as if seeing them for the first time. February 14th, dinner at Bourbon Steak. Charged to Thompson Construction as a client meeting, but Kevin's calendar shows no appointments that evening. March 22nd, overnight stay at the Scottsdale Princess. Business conference that neither your company nor your industry association has any record of hosting. Each revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow, his confident posture crumbling as he realized the extent of the evidence compiled against him. The man who'd believed he was orchestrating my destruction had instead walked directly into a trap that had been months in the making. "How long have you known?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Since the beginning," I replied. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice the changes in your behavior? The secretive phone calls? The unexplained absences? The sudden interest in upgrading your wardrobe? Marcus, I've been watching you lie to me for 6 months. I know exactly when this started and how it's progressed." The guests stood in stunned silence, phones still raised, but now capturing something far more dramatic than they'd anticipated. Social media would be buzzing within minutes, spreading the story of Marcus Thompson's spectacular downfall across Phoenix's professional networks. "The consulting payments to Klein Marketing Solutions are particularly interesting," David added, consulting his notes. "Because Klein Marketing Solutions has no legitimate business registration, no client history, and no services that justify the payments received. It appears to be a shell company created specifically to launder money from Thompson Construction to support Ms. Klein's lifestyle." Vanessa's face went ashen as she realized the legal implications of what David was describing. What she'd viewed as clever financial maneuvering was actually documented fraud that could result in criminal charges. "That's not true," she stammered. "I provide legitimate marketing consultation services." "Really?" I asked, pulling up another screen on my phone. "Because according to the Arizona Secretary of State's office, Klein Marketing Solutions was incorporated 3 weeks after you and Marcus had your first coffee meeting. And according to your social media posts, you were describing yourself as between careers, right up until the first payment was processed." The methodical destruction of their cover story was having a visible effect on both Marcus and Vanessa. What they'd believed was a secret romance was being revealed as a documented pattern of deception and financial misconduct that had legal consequences far beyond divorce proceedings. "There's more," David said, clearly enjoying the systematic demolition of their position. "Elena has been working with a forensic accountant to trace the complete financial picture. The misappropriated funds total nearly $60,000 when you include the business expenses, cash withdrawals, and direct payments to the shell company. The amount was significant enough to transform this from a marital dispute into a potential criminal matter. Marcus's construction business depended on his reputation for integrity and financial responsibility. His clients trusted him with million-dollar projects based on his supposed character and reliability. $60,000, I repeated, letting the sum hang in the air. Stolen from the business you built on the foundation of being a trustworthy family man. Used to wine and dine your girlfriend while lying to me about working late on projects that didn't exist." Judge Morrison, who'd been standing near the back of the crowd, cleared his throat. "Marcus, this is quite serious. Financial misconduct in business operations can have consequences beyond civil proceedings." The judge's words carried additional weight, reminding everyone present that this situation had implications in both family court and potentially criminal court. Marcus's face went completely white as he realized that his romantic adventure might cost him everything he'd worked to build. "Your business license requires disclosure of any legal proceedings," added Monica Steinberg, whose husband's investment firm had significant contracts with Thompson Construction. "This kind of scandal could affect your bonding and insurance coverage." The professional consequences were cascading in real time as Marcus's clients and business associates processed the implications of what they were witnessing. Trust was the foundation of the construction industry, and trust was exactly what Marcus had destroyed through his actions. "Elena, surely we can work this out privately," Marcus said, desperation creeping into his voice as he realized the full scope of his predicament. "There's no need to involve lawyers and courts. We can settle this between ourselves. Like you settled our marriage between ourselves? I asked. By systematically lying to me while planning to humiliate me publicly? By stealing from your own business to fund your affair? By bringing your mistress to our anniversary party to witness my destruction? The crowd murmured agreement, clearly siding with me as the victim of Marcus's elaborate deception. What he'd planned as my public humiliation had become his own spectacular downfall, witnessed by everyone whose opinion mattered in our social and professional circles. I have a proposal, I continued, my voice taking on the businesslike tone I used for real estate negotiations. Marcus, you can sign these divorce papers tonight in front of everyone and agree to the settlement terms David has prepared. Or we can let this play out in court, where all of this evidence becomes part of the public record. David nodded approvingly. Arizona has strong disclosure requirements for divorce proceedings involving business assets. Everything we've discussed tonight would be presented in detail during court hearings that are open to the public. The threat was clear. Marcus could accept whatever terms I was offering, or he could face even more public exposure through extended legal proceedings that would destroy what remained of his reputation. What are the terms? Marcus asked, his voice defeated. David opened his portfolio and withdrew another document. Elena retains ownership of the family home, her personal business assets, and 70% of your joint financial holdings. Thompson Construction continues operating, but with a court-appointed monitor to ensure no further financial misconduct. Marcus receives his personal belongings and 30% of current liquid assets. The terms were harsh but not unreasonable given the documented evidence of financial misconduct. Marcus would survive financially, but his days of controlling the narrative of our relationship were permanently over. And Miss Klein? David asked, turning to Vanessa with professional courtesy that masked legal menace. Miss Klein will be returning all jewelry and gifts purchased with misappropriated business funds, David continued. She'll also be responsible for reimbursing Thompson Construction for the fraudulent consulting payments received through her shell company. Vanessa's face crumpled as she realized that her financial salvation was actually becoming her financial destruction. The wealthy boyfriend she'd been counting on to solve her problems was instead dragging her into legal trouble that could result in criminal charges. I don't have $60,000, she whispered. Then you'll be making payments, David replied matter-of-factly. The court can arrange wage garnishment or asset seizure to ensure full restitution is made. The romantic adventure that had seemed so promising 6 months ago was revealing itself as a catastrophic miscalculation that would have consequences lasting for years. Vanessa had targeted Marcus as her financial salvation, but instead, she'd destroyed both their futures through short-sighted greed and elaborate deception. Marcus, I said, my voice softening slightly, you have 5 minutes to decide. Sign the papers tonight and accept responsibility for your actions, or watch this play out in court, where the consequences will be much worse for both of you. The ultimatum hung in the desert air as Marcus looked around at the faces surrounding him. Friends, clients, family members, all watching as he faced the choice between accepting defeat gracefully or fighting a battle he couldn't possibly win. The photographer continued documenting every moment, ensuring that whatever decision Marcus made would be preserved for posterity. The anniversary celebration had become something none of us would ever forget, but for very different reasons than anyone had anticipated when the evening began. Part 5. The final victory. Marcus stood frozen in the center of our patio, surrounded by 50 witnesses who had come to celebrate our marriage, and instead were watching it end in spectacular fashion. The string lights cast dramatic shadows across his face as he processed the impossible choice I'd given him: sign the divorce papers immediately, or face complete destruction through public court proceedings. This is insane, he muttered, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair. Elena, you can't seriously expect me to sign legal documents at our anniversary party. Why not? I asked, my voice carrying the reasonable tone of someone making a simple business proposal. You expected me to accept public humiliation at our anniversary party. You expected me to quietly disappear while you and Vanessa started your new life with my grandmother's ring. This seems like a fair exchange. The crowd pressed closer, sensing that they were witnessing the climax of a drama that would be discussed in Phoenix social circles for years to come. Phone cameras remained raised, capturing every expression and gesture for immediate social media distribution. Vanessa tugged at Marcus's sleeve, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. "Marcus, maybe we should just sign whatever they want. This is getting out of control." "Out of control?" I laughed, the sound clear and genuine in the desert evening air. "Vanessa, this is completely in control. Every single detail of tonight was planned to perfection. Your boyfriend just walked into a trap that took me 6 months to construct." David Park checked his watch with theatrical precision. 4 minutes remaining, Marcus. The terms won't improve with additional deliberation." Marcus looked desperately around the crowd, searching for allies who might support his position. Instead, he found faces displaying varying degrees of disappointment, embarrassment, and professional concern. The business associates who had respected his integrity were recalculating their relationships. The friends who had admired our marriage were processing the extent of his deception. "Marcus," called out Patricia Valdez from her position near the dessert table, "as your banker, I have to advise you that prolonged legal proceedings could affect your business credit lines. The publicity alone might trigger review clauses in several of your commercial loans." The financial reality was sinking in, as Marcus realized that fighting this publicly would destroy him professionally regardless of the legal outcome. His construction business depended on trust and reputation, both of which were already damaged beyond repair by the evening's revelations. 3 minutes, David announced. "Fine," Marcus said suddenly, his voice cracking with defeat. "Where do I sign?" The crowd exhaled collectively, the tension releasing like air from a punctured balloon. Several guests actually applauded, though whether they were applauding Marcus's decision or my victory wasn't entirely clear. David produced a fountain pen with the flourish of someone who had anticipated this moment. "Initial each page, sign at the bottom. Ms. Klein, you'll need to sign the restitution agreement as well." Marcus took the pen with shaking hands, his movements mechanical as he processed each page of the divorce settlement. Every signature stripped away another piece of the life he'd thought he controlled, transferring assets and authority to the woman he'd planned to destroy. "The jewelry," David prompted Vanessa, who stood paralyzed beside Marcus. With obvious reluctance, Vanessa began removing the expensive accessories that had become symbols of her imagined triumph. The diamond necklace, the pearl earrings, the tennis bracelet, each piece representing thousands of dollars stolen from Marcus's business to fund their deception. "Including the ring," I said quietly, extending my hand toward her. Vanessa looked down at my grandmother's wedding ring, which had been on her finger for less than 30 minutes but had already come to represent her future security. Slowly, reluctantly, she slid it off and placed it in my palm. The ring felt warm from her skin but somehow cleaner as I slipped it back onto my own finger where it belonged. 4 generations of Rodriguez women had worn this ring with honor, and I wouldn't let it be tainted by Vanessa's brief possession. "The consulting company needs to be dissolved immediately," David continued, presenting Vanessa with her own set of documents. "Any remaining funds in the Klein Marketing Solutions account will be transferred to Thompson Construction as partial restitution." Vanessa signed with tears streaming down her cheeks, each signature acknowledging her role in the fraud that had destroyed her financial prospects rather than securing them. The wealthy boyfriend she'd been counting on was now legally obligated to destroy her economically. As the final signatures were completed, Judge Morrison stepped forward with the authority that came from 30 years on the bench. "This has been most irregular, but I'm prepared to witness these documents and ensure they're filed properly with the court on Monday morning." The legal formalities were completed with surprising efficiency, transforming our anniversary celebration into the venue for our divorce proceedings. What Marcus had intended as my public humiliation had become his legal capitulation, witnessed by everyone whose opinion mattered in our community. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, raising my champagne glass toward the assembled crowd, "thank you all for being here tonight to witness the end of my marriage to Marcus Thompson. Your presence has ensured that justice was served publicly and completely." The toast was met with uncertain applause, as guests processed the surreal nature of what they'd witnessed. They'd come expecting to celebrate 7 years of successful marriage, and instead had watched it end through systematic exposure of fraud and infidelity. Marcus stood defeated beside the cocktail table where the evidence of his deception was still spread for everyone to see. The confident man who had orchestrated my planned humiliation was gone, replaced by someone who looked older and utterly broken. "Elena," he said quietly, his voice barely audible above the desert breeze. "I never meant for things to go this far." "Yes, you did," I replied without malice. "You meant for them to go exactly this far. You just expected me to be the one destroyed instead of you." Vanessa had retreated to the edge of the patio, isolated from the crowd that now viewed her as an opportunistic homewrecker rather than a romantic figure. Her expensive dress, probably purchased with Marcus's stolen money, looked garish under the string lights. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now you learn to live with the consequences of your choices," I replied. "Thompson Construction continues operating under court supervision. You keep 30% of our assets and try to rebuild your reputation. Vanessa pays restitution until every stolen dollar is returned." The practical arrangements sounded almost mundane after the evening's drama, but they represented the complete restructuring of 3 lives based on the truth, rather than the elaborate deceptions that had defined the past 6 months. "And you?" Marcus asked. "What do you get out of destroying everything we built together?" "I get my self-respect back," I answered. "I get to stop pretending that our marriage was something it wasn't. I get to build a new life based on honesty, instead of illusion." The crowd began dispersing slowly, guests exchanging contact information and promises to connect about what they'd witnessed. The story would spread through Phoenix's professional networks within hours, ensuring that Marcus and Vanessa's humiliation would have lasting consequences beyond the legal proceedings. David Pack gathered his documents with the satisfaction of an attorney who had executed a perfect legal strategy. "Elena, this was brilliantly orchestrated. Most people would have confronted the situation privately and lost the strategic advantage." "Most people don't spend 15 years in real estate development," I replied. "I know how to research a deal, identify the leverage points, and execute when the timing is optimal." As the catering staff began cleaning up the remnants of our anniversary celebration, I found myself standing alone on the patio where my marriage had officially ended. The desert night was peaceful, with distant city lights twinkling across the valley like stars. My phone buzzed with the first social media notifications as guests began posting about the evening's events. The story would be trending on Phoenix social media within hours, establishing the official narrative before Marcus or Vanessa could attempt damage control. "Mrs. Thompson?" The photographer approached with obvious excitement. "I've never captured anything quite like this before. These images are going to be incredible." "Elena Rodriguez," I corrected gently. "I'll be going back to my maiden name. And yes, these images will be very useful for the court proceedings." 6 months later, I stood in the same spot on what was now my patio, hosting a housewarming party for my new life. The divorce had been finalized without additional drama, Marcus having learned the wisdom of avoiding further public humiliation. Thompson Construction survived under court supervision, though Marcus's role was significantly diminished. Vanessa Klein had moved back to California, where she was making monthly restitution payments while working as a marketing coordinator for a small nonprofit organization. Her dreams of financial security through strategic romance had been permanently shattered by her miscalculation of both Marcus's character and my intelligence. The guests at my housewarming party included many of the same people who had witnessed the end of my marriage, but the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of celebrating a false relationship built on deception, we were acknowledging my freedom to build something authentic. "To Elena," Monica Steinberg announced, raising her glass toward me, "for showing all of us what real strength looks like when someone tries to break you." The toast was met with genuine warmth, recognition that I had faced betrayal with strategic intelligence rather than emotional collapse. The story of my revenge had become legendary in Phoenix social circles, but more importantly, it had established my reputation as someone who couldn't be underestimated or manipulated. My grandmother's ring caught the light as I raised my champagne glass, its diamonds sparkling with renewed purpose. 4 generations of Rodriguez women had worn it with honor, and now it would continue to symbolize strength and resilience rather than false promises. The desert evening was perfect, with comfortable temperatures and clear skies that showcased the natural beauty that had drawn me to Phoenix in the first place. But more than the weather, what made the evening perfect was the knowledge that I was finally living my authentic life. free from the elaborate deceptions that had defined my marriage. As my guests mingled and celebrated, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The woman who had stood in this same spot 6 months earlier, discovering her husband's betrayal, had been devastated, but not defeated. Instead, she had channeled her intelligence and strategic thinking into creating the perfect revenge. The story would become part of Phoenix folklore, passed down through social circles as a cautionary tale about underestimating women, and a triumph story about justice served with precision timing. But for me, it was simply the end of one chapter, and the beginning of something much better. Marcus had given my wedding ring to his ex, believing he could control the narrative of our relationship's end. Instead, I had given him divorce papers that permanently transferred that control to me. In the end, the perfect revenge wasn't just about destroying his plans. It was about reclaiming my power to write my own story. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.